We want to welcome you to another segment of our mental health moments. My name is Linda Golick. I'm the health and wellness consultant at Bellin Health, and we are so pleased that you took some time today to be with us. We know it's a busy time of the year, so we certainly appreciate you hopping on and paying attention to your mental health today. So, very special new guest today. So, with us today is Amanda Beglin. Amanda is actually an RN case manager over at our outpatient mental health intensive program. So, really excited to learn from you today, Amanda, and hear what your world looks like. And more excited, even, to be talking about boundaries today. And I think that's a really helpful topic for many of us. Probably we will be needing some tools in the next couple weeks, perhaps, in setting some boundaries around all the holiday mayhem. So, Amanda, why don't you just give us a little bit of information about yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do so that people get to know you.
Okay. Well, so like Lisa said, my name's Amanda. And you'll have to excuse me, I am getting over a cold. So I work in our mental health intensive outpatient program, which is a 4-week program that really helps people stay out of the hospital, or it's a step down program for patients that are struggling with mental illness. We get to teach classes, different therapeutic skill sets, and I get to teach one of our health promotion classes and symptom relapse classes. And it's just a joy to be here. I'm so excited to talk about boundaries. I think that everybody needs boundaries and in so many different areas of our lives in order to be fulfilling our own purpose and doing it in a healthy way as well and not growing resentment. And then also talking about self-care today, which is super important. And I feel like a lot of people don't have self-care on their to-do list around these times of the year.
Yes. 1000% agree with you. Well, let's start out with kind of laying the groundwork of what we mean when we're talking about boundaries. So how would you define boundaries, Amanda?
So, I mean, boundaries can be defined in a lot of different ways. I think, you can talk about boundaries being hard boundaries, which are non-negotiables, things that I will not do this under any circumstance. And then you have like soft boundaries, which are more of aspirations, things that you wish could happen, that you're a little bit flexible on and you could compromise. So kind of figuring out which one you want. And then there's different types of boundaries that you set too. So you have like your physical boundaries that you set, like I will not let anybody into this space, or emotional boundaries where you're separating your feelings from others, right? You're not taking on responsibility of someone else's emotions and feelings. And the way that you let people talk to you is an emotional boundary too, because a lot of times we let people just kind of talk to us really negatively, and being able to set a boundary to let them know that, hey, when you talk to me that way, I'm not going to respond, or I'm not going to listen, and I'm going to leave. Spiritual boundaries where you're not letting others control your calling in life and your talents in life. And then mental boundaries, looking at that internal climate of safety, looking at your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, what values you have, and the opinions that you have, and the beliefs that you have. And then time boundary, which I think is a really important one.
Mhm.
What are you spending your time on? Is it
Mhm.
yourself? Is it others? Is it something that brings you joy? Is it something that you're doing because it's expected of you? So those are like the definitions of boundaries, right? And how we
Mhm.
can look at different aspects and areas in our life. In mental health IOP, we actually have a self-care assessment where we look at different areas of our life, and then we can reflect on, where do I need to set better boundaries? Um, but if you're looking at like boundaries as a whole, boundaries are built so that we can create a safe space for ourselves. right? Because if we don't have boundaries, people are going to continue to take and take and take, or we're going to continue to give and give and give too, until there's nothing left. And Yasmin Cheyenne has this really great TED Talk where she talks about how our boundaries are like a sugar jar. You know, we have this jar of sugar, we only get one, and that represents us, that sugar jar. The boundaries are all around the jar, but the lid on top is what we have control of, right? And sugar is sweet. People like sugar. And so people are going to stick their hands in there and take sugar out. And sometimes we just freely let them take the sugar out. And so our sugar just gets dispensed all over until there's nothing left. And then what happens? We have no sugar to add to our coffee. Our coffee tastes bitter and we become resentful. And so it's figuring out, how do we put the lid on top of our sugar jar? When is it appropriate for us to do that? When do we set those boundaries for that sugar jar? And then if you're finding that, okay, I didn't set any boundaries and my sugar is all over the place, how do I pick all of that back up? Right? Because that's hard, right? Because you've let people get used to taking from you. But it's possible, right? To set boundaries. It's possible to set boundaries even when there was none.
You know, I wanted,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I just wanted to connect this to, you know, we often talk about the different dimensions of health and well-being, and we think about all the different things that make us up. And I love how when you're talking about boundaries, you're talking about those different areas. So things like the physicality, the spirituality, environmentally, emotionally, all these different pieces that make us up, and really maybe examining where are we not doing so well and where can we start, you know, setting those boundaries. Just as we talk about health habits, like where can we start? What is something we can work on? Perhaps if people are struggling with setting boundaries, they can start to look at these different dimensions and at least have a starting point, like where can I take a step?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why it's so important to tie in self-care to boundaries, because then you really can examine and see, okay, I am really struggling in this area of my life of self-care. And maybe I need to examine what sort of boundaries I have established and what sort of boundaries I'd be comfortable establishing, right? Yeah. I would say too that, boundaries are important for us because we're responsible for the people who have access to that sugar jar, and we're responsible for how much we give away too, right? So boundaries aren't like asking for what you want and need from those around you. It's expecting others, or it is that, and it's not expecting others to know what you need. And it's being comfortable saying no, which a lot of people are not comfortable saying because we grow up learning that no is not okay to say. You're, as a toddler, one of the first words we learn, I have an 18-month-old who loves the word no. He is obsessed with it. And we have to, we teach him, well, you can't say no to everything. And so that is instilled into us right away. And then you turn into a teenager and you don't say no to people. You continue people pleasing so that you can fit in. And then when you're a young adult, you don't say no because you don't want to look like you're incapable of doing something. And then that just starts to be where your sugar jar just empties out and you have nothing left and you become resentful of that and unable to establish those boundaries, and you become unhealthy. And two, if you think about it, if we don't set those boundaries and are mindful about setting boundaries, our body will start setting boundaries.
Yes.
You'll start
Yes, it
getting
will.
headaches. you'll start getting muscle tension. You'll start getting, you know, different colds more easy. Our immune system goes down when we start getting
Mhm.
stressed. So it's so important for not just like our mental state, but it's so important for our physical state of being to
Yeah.
set boundaries.
So let's talk about that in connection to self-care, because I think that's a big thing that we've talked about over time, and I'm a big believer in that you have to set the boundaries in terms of you are a human being. You do have limitations. You cannot be everyone for everything, everywhere, all the time. And if you are doing that, you probably are a very burnt out, tired individual because
Mhm.
there can't possibly be any time left for self care if you're conducting your life in that way, right?
Right. I mean, where would you find the time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'd like to just throw this out there for anybody to answer. What do people think self-care is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Go ahead and chat in your responses. Um, yeah, for me, I think of self-care as something that I'm doing entirely for myself. And it can be in a lot of different ways. It can be something physical, it can be something emotional, it can be something spiritual, but I'm putting something back in the cup, right? Like I'm filling the cup because I can't pour from an empty cup. So to me, self-care is putting something back in because otherwise, how can I possibly give to others? So
Yeah.
here we have some responses. We have quiet time, we have meditation. That's good. Love that. Love that. We've done a couple of meditations on these segments, and people always respond really, really well to that. And I always like to remind people you can't do meditation wrong. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know how to meditate or whatever, but it really is just taking some time to just be in the quiet or pay attention to your breathing. You can listen to guided meditations online to get you started, but just focus on your breathing or focus on the music that's playing and just kind of be in that moment. Someone has exercise, that's good too. Yep,
Yeah, and I
absolutely.
would add to the the meditation too. So in IOP, we do meditation before every single group session that we have, and people are really nervous about the meditation at first. But after they go through the program and we give them the questionnaire of like what did you really enjoy about this program, I'd say 80% of the time they always say meditation.
Mm,
And that's something that they want to keep doing. And I always try and explain like meditation is a practice, right? It's you're never going to be perfect at it. You're always going to be practicing it. And because we're not, in the foothills of the Himalayas in Nepal and in this quiet area, we're living in Western society where there's a hustle and bustle constantly, and it's really difficult for us to just disconnect and take time. And it takes time to get really, really good at meditation, and that's
hmm.
okay. Start where you can and just work towards being able to be mindful and bringing that practice into your daily life. Which
You know,
I did bring a meditation along because I
did you?
thought it might be
Okay.
good to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, why don't we do that? Maybe do you want to do that towards the end? Maybe
Sure
we can
thing.
kind of wrap up that way and send everyone out on a peaceful note. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about how that connects to boundaries. Um, how do we start to set those? So I know that, we talk about you and I were kind of discussing this idea of maybe like the three areas of our lives, right? Like we might have work, we might have personal lives, and then family might be another major category. Those are some areas that we can pay attention to. So, how do we start? If we are one of those folks in the world, we're total people pleasers, we say yes to everything, we want to be everybody's hero, we want to be everybody's best friend. Um, Where do we start? Where do we start with starting to set boundaries? How do we learn that?
Well, first, I think you need to reflect on where you need to set boundaries, right? So, taking some sort of self care quiz and seeing where you're lacking in self care in your life. In those areas, the areas that we focus on are physical self care, psychological and emotional self care, spiritual self care, relational self care, and professional self care. So that basically covers what you were talking about, the family, the professional work, and then spiritual, I think, is super important. If you look at, just a side note, the word psyche is from the Old Greek, which means spirit. And so psychology really started in that. Um, and then, so after you kind of figure out where you're lacking in self care and where you need to establish these boundaries, think about who you need to communicate and share the boundaries with. Um, who is involved in these boundaries that you need to set. And then think about what sort of beliefs start to come up when you create the boundaries that may be stopping you from actually starting them, right? Because sometimes we're afraid of the repercussions of setting these boundaries and kind of going through the emotions of, okay, if I set this boundary with this person, I have to be okay with whatever emotional state they come out of with this boundary. I have to be okay with that storm that might come.
Mm.
And just preparing yourself for that. And then after you set the boundaries, um, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to continue on with those boundaries and protect those boundaries? Protect yourself through that. And then once you kind of figure all of that out and plan ahead and make those goals, what's the first step to take? You know, that's what we always talk about in IOP is we can set all these goals and do SMART goals and make all these plans, but really we need to focus on what is that first step, because it's that first step that's the hardest, and being
So with
able to.
everything, so with everything coming up just in the next couple weeks and holidays and families and all those types of things, what do you think would be some examples of some boundaries that maybe people could think about, examples of things that maybe they may want to consider or set for themselves to really try to preserve, their mental health, especially over the next couple of weeks? Because I think, we know that the holiday season can be emotionally difficult for many, many people. It's a season of people feeling an extra sense of grief and loss if they've lost loved ones. It can be financially straining, in some situations for people. So, what can people do? What are some examples, do you think, for people to consider in terms of setting boundaries?
That's a great question. I think, the social aspect of the holidays can be really stressful for people, and having to attend all different parties and go to gatherings, and maybe just being able to say, I am not going to go to this party. And that's okay. Or I'm not going to attend this function, and that's okay. I actually heard something on the radio the other day that they did a study on people not attending parties and like holiday gatherings. And actually, the hosts were more likely to be happy about that when
Mm.
people didn't go. So it just shows you too how like people feel like they're obligated to
Yeah.
throw these parties and maybe they don't even want to. Um,
Mhm.
so being able and then taking some time like 5 minutes of the day and saying, I'm setting a boundary to take 5 minutes today to meditate, to have some quiet time, to just reflect on what's happening. Or even if it's just driving home in your car, and instead of thinking, okay, I have to do this, and that when I get home, I'm going to set this time aside, this 5-10 minutes that I have in the car, to just be present in this moment and just take some time to be mindful about what I'm doing and experience what I'm experiencing and check in with my body too. Because so many of us probably are getting sick. If we have kids, we have things that
Yeah.
are coming home. They love to share the germs. And so just taking time to check in with our body too and being okay to say no to things.
You know, I learned a really great lesson years ago. I had a coworker that was a really dear friend of mine, and she held her summers really sacred because they had a place up north, on the lake, and that was really important to them. And so if she was invited to things over the summer, she didn't always go. And she said that to me, like, you don't have to say yes to everything you're invited to. And that always stayed with me. Like, you don't have to say yes just because you were invited, just because you were asked. It doesn't mean you have to say yes. That's a way to set a boundary. The other thing I think about, especially this time of year, is really setting the priorities. What's the most important stuff to you? And in the holiday season and with everything going on, what are the must-dos for you, or what are the things that are really traditional that do have the most importance to you? Focus on that. And if
Mm-hmm.
the rest of it doesn't happen, that's okay. And I'm one that some years I get out Christmas cards and some years I don't. It just kind of depends on how it rolls out. But decide what's the most important, set your eyes on that, and
Mm-hmm.
the rest will be whatever it will be. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. And eventually, the hope is that you'll get to a spot where you're recognizing that you aren't saying no to others, but you're saying yes to yourself,
Mhm. Yeah,
which is,
yeah.
and again, it's so difficult to do at first, but once you keep practicing that, it becomes easier and easier. And the first time you say no, I think is the most difficult, because you might have those stormy emotions that come. But then after that, that moment of storm comes this freedom because you set that boundary and now you're able to invest in yourself and give yourself time and fill
Yeah,
yourself up.
yeah. Love that. Love it, love it. Well, if you have questions for Amanda, feel free to put those in the chat. Would love to see if anyone has some questions and get some more great info out of Amanda today. Amanda, so as we kind of look at moving into the new year and different things that are happening and things like that too, how do we remind ourselves to keep boundaries as something that's okay? How do we remind ourselves?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Because
How
we're
do
going to
we?
lose it, right? Like, we're talking about
Yeah.
it today, and so people are
Hmm.
going to be reminded, and when they listen to the recording, they're going to be reminded. And then whatever the next season is, right?
Well,
The mayhem commences.
I think that's why it's important that when you build these boundaries, that you establish some way that you're going to manage these boundaries before you
Mhm.
even like tell whomever it is or create whatever schedule it is for yourself where you have these boundaries. But establishing in your mind, this is how I'm going to manage this. But I don't know how to have like daily reminders of boundaries. I think
Well,
it's
I
just
think
a
it's just,
practice.
yeah, I think it is. And I think it's just reminding ourselves like what we need to be the best version of ourselves. So, I always think about, like, you can't take care of anybody if you don't take care of you. So, if something doesn't get done because I need an extra hour of sleep, that is what it is, right? And
Mhm.
and in our house, sleep is a big priority because we don't function well anywhere if we don't get enough sleep in my house. So that's a priority for us, and that's just the way that we structure our lives. So I think some structure, can help people setting in the things that are the most important to you, maybe making that some type of a scheduled thing. It might be exercise, it might be meditation, it
Mhm.
might be a class that you want to take that enriches you in some way that is important to you. And just trying to build that in.
Yeah.
Try to build that
And
in.
and constantly listening to your body,
Yeah,
taking time to
exactly.
listen to what your body is saying.
Yes. Yes. Well, Amanda, I would love if you would lead us in a meditation as we kind of wrap up today. I think that would be fantastic. And we'll see if anybody has any questions after that.
All right. So we're going to do a mindful minute. Taking a deep, full breath in and a long, slow exhale. Allowing your eyes to gently close or having a soft gaze. Another nice big breath in. Long, slow exhale so that you can begin to feel the body release. One more deep, long inhale. And on the exhale, allowing yourself to fully arrive into this body, into this moment, and into this breath. Now letting go of any control of the breath and simply allowing yourself to be here. Letting be all the effort it has taken to bring you here now. Letting be all the thoughts, pressures of what is yet to come, and giving yourself the gift of this moment. As you are ready, taking a moment to turn inward and notice, asking yourself, how am I now? How am I holding my day so far in my body? Labeling for yourself in one or two words what is here for you now, whether it be tension, excitement, anxiety, numbness, readiness, whatever it may be, simply notice it with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. Now taking a fuller deep breath and exhale and refocus. Wiggle your fingers and toes, stretch a little bit, and open your eyes. And
That
that
was
concludes the
so
meditation.
nice. That was so nice. One of the phrases that really stood out to me is, how are you holding your day so far in your body?
Mm-hmm.
That's so thought provoking because sometimes we hold that tension in, right? And we can feel it.
Yeah.
And so it's just so good to reflect on that. How are we holding that? It's awesome. Well,
And then
Maureen is,
how are we going to work on taking that tension away?
mhm. Maureen said she's going to do this mid-morning and mid-afternoon at her desk. Awesome.
That's
That's
great.
awesome. Awesome. Well, if you have any final questions for Amanda, feel free to put them in the chat. But Amanda, any parting thoughts, any closing thoughts to leave our audience with? Anything you didn't get to share that you wanted to share today, or anything else you want to remind us all of today?
I think the biggest thing is that as we create all of our to-do lists to get done all the things that we need to do to help other people and get our houses prepared and all the presents wrapped, we got to make sure that we're adding our name and our needs to that list as well.
Absolutely. Put yourself on the list. Put
Mhm.
yourself on the list. Awesome. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for being with us today and doing such a great segment on boundaries. I think we all learned a lot today, and we'll all be reflecting on how we can care for ourselves through the holiday season and beyond. So thank
Thanks
you
so
for
much for
being
having
here.
me. Yeah,
You
thank you
bet.
for having me.
You bet. Thanks to our audience. Again, thanks for taking some time today. And oh, I thought someone just raised their hand, but maybe not. Thanks for taking the time today. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out, wellnessconsultant@bellin.org, where you get the invite from, and I can pass those on to Amanda as well if you need anything else. So otherwise, enjoy the day. Have a beautiful holiday season, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Amanda.